How did Stamford Capital first get started?
Stamford Capital started as an idea between Mike and I initially. We were actually working at the same organisation where we'd worked together for a period of about 5 or 6 years. We got to a point in that organisation where we hit the equity ceiling and made the decision to start Stamford. Of course, it wasn't called Stamford at that point. We didn't know what we were going to call the business, but hopped out first in probably, August, September 2010. Had an opportunity, a great opportunity actually presented itself with a transaction in Melbourne with a Singaporean lender called Capital Land, and that was the very first mandate that we got signed, and it was an amazing opportunity actually. It was a very high fee paying deal and really cemented the business. And then over the Christmas period, we put together a business plan and wrote down what we thought were going to be some core values, which I've obviously shared with the team, and mapped out what we wanted the business to be. And really at that point we didn't know, we're kind of still figuring it out in some respects. We didn't actually know what we wanted the business to become, but we did know that we had some smarts in and around real estate and real estate capital, and that we had a common set of values between Mike and I in particular when we started the business, and that we wanted to deliver outstanding customer experience when dealing with our clients. And that was the genesis of the business really. Shortly after we started the business, in fact it might have been just before Christmas, David rang. He was in Canada at the time and he asked for a reference. And I, obviously knowing what was happening with Mike, I said to him, mate, I'm not going to give you a reference, but why don't you come back and join Stamford? So 2 very quickly became 3. And I think David almost immediately jumped at the opportunity to come back, and obviously he's gone on to do some amazing stuff. I live in Stamford Avenue in Cabarita, but that wasn't the primary reason. We wanted to have a name that sounded quite established, and where if someone heard the name, they almost immediately felt a sense of connectivity with it. And as I mentioned earlier, we were originally doing a little bit of business out of Asia, and Sir Stamford Raffles was one of the early British colonial leaders of Singapore. And so we borrowed the name from there as well. So it was actually a couple of crossover points, but again, it depends on who we're talking to. But I do think that it does have a old world feel about it and a trusted status around it. So that's where the name came from.
Why do I think we exist? I think we exist to provide optimal funding solutions for our client. Like I said, there's typically not a scenario where we can't assist a client. I don't think there's a lot of businesses in our space which can say that 100%, but I can, put my hand on my heart and say that we always have the client's interests first, and we would deliver an optimal funding outcome based on that interest.
It's because of the people. We've got good people in this business, and the people drive the brand, and the brand drives the business. I think it's a fun place. I like coming to work. I like the people that I work with. I like what we do. It's dynamic. I like deal making, and I like the flexibility. Real estate's a good space. It's not, we're not caught sort of looking at screens. We deal with real assets, which we get to sort of see and touch. And real people, so all of that, and it's predominantly it's just a good fun place.
Good question. There's a lot of things I like about Stamford Capital as a business, but probably the best thing I like about Stamford is from a client perspective, there's typically not a situation that I can't help a client out. Whether it's helping them out via our scheme investments business or more so in the originations business, there's typically not a scenario where I can't deliver a good funding outcome for a client.
Well, the answer to that question has probably changed over time. When Mike and I first started the business, a huge motivator for both of us was to not go back into the corporate world. We really wanted to create our own thing and build on to the core values that we wrote down when we first started the business. And that was a huge motivator in the early days. And it was a really exciting time, to be honest. It was a time when we didn't quite know how successful the business would be. It was the first time that both Mike and I had started a business, so it was a completely new experience for us both. But yeah, that was probably the primary motivator at the beginning. Was we wanted to create something which was valuable for our clients, but we in particular didn't want to go back and work for a big company ever again, because we were sick of the bureaucratic rubbish that went on. And I think the thing that sort of gets me now, fast forward sort of nearly 8 years, I love the culture in the office. I love the people in the office, and not just the Sydney office, the interstate offices as well. It's got a great atmosphere and people are very helpful towards each other. They're very respectful of each other, and that's again one of our core values.
Next year, I think it's going to be a great year. It has been a great environment for us for the last 2 years. And I think that's going to be here for the medium term, just with the banks tightening up. You know, every sort of month or so a bank will come to us and say they're in, and then another bank comes to us and says they're out, and that sort of change in liquidity in the market is only good for a business like ours. 5 years' time, that's sort of a long time away, but ultimately, you know, a national platform in terms of our origination business and the investments business or the lending business, the Skim platform, having, I don't know what the number is, but a solid track record at that stage of value-add investments, both from a debt and an equities perspective, and having the flexibility within that investments platform to move with the market, whether it be debt or equity, depending on the cycles of the property market.
I think all of the offices are sort of well-placed, well-founded in their markets. I'm really excited about Adelaide and Brisbane in particular. And the Brisbane guys are obviously a bit ahead of the curve in terms of growth as opposed to the Adelaide office. So I think Southeast Queensland's going to be a pretty amazing market for us. I do think in time, once those two offices have got real footholds, which I don't think is too far away, we'll look to do something into Melbourne to complete the piece. And I've always been a believer that, you know, having geographic footprint brings its own value, and obviously Melbourne is probably the last key piece for us, and that footprint just gives us, I suppose, better grounds to have conversation with capital, because we then have complete distribution in the major markets in Australia.
When we started the business, we didn't have a balance sheet. We didn't have a track record or a history, not within the brand of Stanford anyway. So we had to transact, so we just had to do deals. That was the reality of the situation in the early days. And it's still largely the case. I mean, the business lives and breathes off successfully executing transactions. So the core business, the core advisory or the brokerage business will continue to grow, particularly as we bed down, hopefully, Queensland and South Australia. We were originally looking to open Melbourne this year, but we strategically decided not to, because we wanted to focus on ensuring that Queensland become successful. And Queensland's been going nigh on 2 years now, and it's just now starting to show the fruits, I guess, a little bit of the fruits. It's certainly profitable. And the guys have got great traction, but it does take time. It's a business that you just can't open the door and expect immediate results, and that was our experience in Sydney, and that's certainly been the experience in Queensland. I would imagine will be similar in Adelaide, and probably once we open Victoria, much the same. I think the advisory business will mature in the course of the next 3 years or so, and I think the investments business will grow exponentially over the course of that 3-year period, and hopefully well beyond that over the years.
Very exciting.
It is very exciting.
Oh, there's heaps of challenges. Dealing with extremely slow banks at the moment, given APRA and ASIC reviews and so forth, dealing with slow consultants, QS reports and valuations. Clients can also be quite complex as well, which can create a lot of challenges, and typically you're in the middle trying to negotiate the smoothest possible outcome for everyone all the stakeholders in a transaction.
Oh, challenges, where do we start? I mean, as fun as I say it is, it can be frustrating at times. Probably the main challenge is at times, unfortunately, we're in the hands of a third party and you don't have full control, and that can create stress.
Oh, I should say it was my first deal that I did, because that bought Mike his kids' Christmas presents when we first started in 2011, I think it was. But my fondest memory is when there was just three of us in the business, Don, Mike and I, down at Goldfields House, and I forget what it was called. It was like Cold Call Tuesdays or something like that. And we literally just sit there. Everyone would just calling, whether it be me calling people off BCI or the guys calling their existing contacts. And it used to be a lot of fun. We used to drum up a lot of business. I used to get a lot out of it because that was the first time I'd ever been in the marketing space, as opposed to my analytical background before that. So I found it quite challenging. I was uncomfortable at the time, but that's how I started out in the business. So that was a great memory for me.
I do cherish conference. I think it's a terrific opportunity for all of us to get together in a very open and collaborative way. And I've got some great memories from conference, but I guess my most acute memory and memory that stays with me for a long time is the first deal that Mike and I had ever settled. It was a deal in Newcastle. It was funded by ANZ, Ben Henri, who's still a very close, albeit we don't deal with it anymore, but a very close friend of the business and friend of ours personally now. And it was a relatively small deal, and we did make a lot of money out of it. I think it was around $10,000 in terms of fees, but we'd celebrated like we won the lottery. There were many high fives going around the room, and it was a great moment, knowing that it was really the first revenue that the business had created. And it did create it. I mean, we started literally with a blank sheet of paper and a contact list, which we then proceeded to make contact with. But that was a great moment. I think some of the personal stuff as well in the business is really quite memorable. Seeing people achieve things and win and be successful is personally very rewarding for me. I love seeing certainly some of the younger guys and the younger team members which started out of school and out of uni with not too much knowledge, but are now starting to become very successful in what they do. That's very rewarding to experience as an owner of the business, and I guess as a mentor within the business itself.
Fondest, Jesus, I don't know, there's so many. I remember the first deal that we closed, it was just Dom and I in the small little office down in Goldfields House, and it was nothing. I think it was like a $3 or $4 million deal on a little office building in ANZ, but it was incredibly meaningful. I remember we were sort of cheering and high-fiving off the back of doing that. What else? I reckon some of the best memories are just some of the social memories, misbehaving in Queenstown a couple of times. Just good social times. Again, as I sort of said, it's a good bunch of people here who I'm happy to spend time with inside and outside of the office. So they're probably my fondest memories.